Shadow Hack. Chapter 631, Assisting the New King. Yoon-mu was only able to retain an overwhelming superiority in front of the thunder energy because of his battle intent and new battle skill. The next moment, a blue-eyed man with 2 tufts of white mustache appeared. His whitish-gray hair floated gently behind him as he grabbed Hades and quickly evacuated the land of ice. If he hadn't fled quickly, he might also not have been a match for the mortal. But what exactly was going on? The mortal's strength was surprisingly so terrifying this should have been impossible. Hades had sustained severe injuries. If he wasn't brought back to Whale City be quickly healed, he might have truly died. Hades was the man's younger brother, so it was impossible for him to watch him die while doing nothing. Even if they had fallen out before, they had joined their hands right now to deal with other powers excluding the Heavenly Gods' Council in this part of the origin world. Scandinavia had originally been very weak compared to Heavenly Gods' Council and had always existed independently. This was also because they hadn't aligned with any other power and stood alone. The present Scandinavia was like someone coming out of closed-door cultivation after developing themselves. After the formidable mortal had joined them, their strength reached the pinnacle. With the present strength of Heavenly Gods' Council, they found it difficult to threaten Scandinavia, let alone forcing them to yield and swear allegiance. Elder brother. I have disappointed you. Inside this mortal. After saying that far, Hades lost consciousness. For a moment, Zeus looked at him gloomily. Afterwards, he decided to make new plans and advance his program further. Dark state time finished. After the system said those words, the impure black energy surrounding Yoon-mu gradually disappeared. The ruthlessness also disappeared from his eyes. As his body lost all strength, it softly fell on the ground. Brunhilde immediately rushed over and embraced him while nervously saying, "What's wrong with you? Are you all right?" The system answered from Yoon-mu's body. Its voice was filled with a hint of teasing, "I am naturally all right, but as for this youngster, he would need a period of time to recuperate. You don't need to be anxious though. He has just exhausted all his strength and fallen asleep." Brunhilde heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately there was nothing wrong with the man, otherwise, it would have been very difficult for her to calm her conscience. After all, he had attacked to save her and her father. Why else would he have suddenly entered the dark state? Whilst Yoon-mu had been in the dark state, Brunhilde was extremely anxious. But after hearing the system's relaxed words, she was also relieved. Odin looked at Yoon-mu in his daughter's embrace and said to the system, "My friend, from today onwards, I will assist this mortal in rebuking the heavens and earth of the origin world to contend for hegemony in this world. He will become the new king of the origin world, and we will retreat to his shadow, only providing him with assistance. I will use entire Scandinavia's power to assist him to turn my daughter into the empress of this world." Brunhilde's face was slightly flushed, and a hint of bashfulness appeared on her face before disappearing. She suddenly straightened the long spear and promised to Odin, "My powerful father, wait for him to wake up. Then I will marry him and stand by him my whole life." Odin nodded at her. "My princess, your father is reluctant to let you go, but for the grandiose task of obtaining hegemony, one needs to sacrifice the emotions of one's children and diligently cultivate. I believe that with my daughter's support, thou will become the overlord quickly." Brunhilde knelt down on the ground and said with extreme concentration, "Father, this daughter definitely won't let you down." "All right, you father and daughter don't need to become so emotional. I know you have seen the combined strength of me and this host whom you consider mortal. Do you want to stand on our side now? We request that you think about it. Presently, danger lurks everywhere in the origin world. If not for the support of Scandinavia, we won't have any foundation in this world, let alone speak of the grandiose plan of becoming an overlord. Be assured, my friend. I will immediately convene the Scandinavian God Council. If the Heavenly Gods Council wants to find trouble with me, then the Scandinavian God Council will definitely provide valuable assistance," Odin said gloomily. The system heaved a sigh of relief. Sensing that Li Yoon-mu had lost consciousness and his power had dissipated, it shook its head. This youngster still needs to improve. The origin world isn't weak, like those 66 projection planes. Every opponent here is half-step god or higher. Given his present strength, he might not even be able to break through into half-step god without my assistance. Little lassie, have you completely grasped the application of that godly spear? If not, then I can tell you about how to unleash its maximum power. Brunhilde, being half convinced and half in doubt, couldn't help but ask, then how could I display the enormous might of the godly spear to the peak? When this long spear was born at the beginning of the world, the source of its strength was love. Although you have now experienced its power, it was only its most simplistic form. If you also add the strength of yin and yang harmony, this godly spear will display enormous might. When Odin heard the system's words, he couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. The old man was once again messing around by using the opportunity of the mortal being muddle-headed. It was planning to completely control the mortal's body. Brunhilde was someone who hadn't experienced the matters between a man and a woman, so she genuinely believed the system's words. With a blank expression on her face, she asked, "What is this strength of yin and yang harmony?" Ha 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 ha, after you and this youngster marry each other, only then you would know. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective. Odin rolled his eyes and said to the system, "Stop deceiving my princess, this matter is between her and that mortal. You should stop meddling." The system laughed mischievously. Odin's words were correct, the person obtaining the pleasure would be the youngster and not it. At most, it would be able to pleasures its eyes. Seeing Odin suddenly cut the system off, Brunhilde became even more curious and continuously asked, "Father, what exactly is this yin and yang energy? Why are you avoiding the topic? Quickly inform your daughter, how can I obtain this power? Your daughter wants to unleash the enormous might of the godly spear." Ha 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 ha. A glimmer of helplessness flashed through Odin's eyes. How could he tell his daughter about the matters between a man and a woman? This was a matter which should be explored by his daughter with the youngster. Brunhilde's mouth twitched, and she said with an unconvinced expression on her face, "Vater, why aren't you willing to tell me? What sort of secret is it that you don't want me to know? Are you afraid that after I learn about this yin and yang energy, my divine power will surpass yours?" Odin remained silent. His foolish daughter was truly naive and had been urged on by that guy. The system took that moment to speak with Schadenfreude. "Little lassie, this matter isn't urgent. You should wait until this youngster wakes up and then research it with him." Chapter 632, Gluttonies attack. Linuero intruded upon the mythical realm with her supreme transcending level experts. Once inside, they found out that the place was pitch black. After walking only a few steps, they felt chill running down their spine. They seemed to have entered a tiger's den, for countless green lights were flashing in front of their eyes. Many bloodthirsty, savage beasts were roaming around the mythical realm, and all of them were baring their fangs at the intruders at that moment. "Be careful, City Lord." The supreme transcending level experts were protecting Linuero from all sides. If the savage beasts injured her, it would be a great misfortune for Lucky Wind City. There were countless vicious beasts present, surrounding the supreme transcending level experts from all sides. Most of them were issuing low-pitched growls, which were clearly a signal before they attacked. The supreme transcending level experts had never encountered so many savage beasts. The power emitted by them far surpassed that of any creature present on Earth. One of the supreme transcending level experts whose forehead was covered in cold sweat said to Linuero, "City Lord, we seem to be surrounded. We don't know what abilities these vicious beasts possess, so wouldn't it be better for us to retreat?" Retreat? Since they have already arrived, why would they choose to retreat? Not to mention, where exactly would they retreat? As they had already entered the mythical realm, if they wanted to retreat, Linuero was afraid that it wouldn't be easy. All the exits would have been blocked, so only if they could push their way through would they be able to escape alive from the mortal danger. If we truly clashed with these savage beasts, what are the chances that we would be able to exterminate them first? The supreme transcending level expert in the lead spoke in a soft voice. 20%. Measly 20%? That would mean that if they tried to forcibly break through, the little squad of supreme transcending level experts would be completely annihilated. Linuero took a deep breath. They had already sunk into desperate straits. The number of times she had faced such dire straits in the past wasn't low, and she wouldn't accept defeat in front of difficulties. Since the supreme transcending level experts had treated her properly, she couldn't turn her back on these people. She would definitely lead them out of the mythical realm, for only then she would be able to repay the trust shown to her by Lee Yoon-mu. When exactly will that guy Lee Yoon-mu return? I want to cultivate these supreme transcending level experts nurtured by you, but if the losses are disastrous, would you blame me when you return? The vicious beasts growled continuously as if provoking Linuero's group. The beasts were watching them like a tiger its prey, waiting for an opportunity to make their move. The moment when Linuero and her people lost their concentration, they would start their fierce offense. Linuero quickly observed her surroundings. Since the mythical realm was built by a human, then whether the things inside were real or illusion, it could not be identified clearly. Moreover, there was a method to break the illusion, even if it was established with utmost care. As long as someone had created it, there had to be some flaws in it. Thinking of this, Linuero continuously surveyed her surroundings, trying to find the advantage for her supreme transcending level experts to deal with the vicious beasts. City Lord, I recognize these vicious beasts. They are the legendary Gluttony. Gluttony? Linuero was slightly startled. Gluttonies were bloodthirsty by nature. They were famous for being savage carnivorous beasts who devoured anything and everything. Their stomachs were like a bottomless pit, and they were insatiably avaricious. When Linuero thought about this, cold sweat covered her body. She hadn't expected that their luck would be so bad that they would encounter a vicious beast like Gluttony. But if they wanted to leave, they had to first deal with them. Moreover, it should be done without losing any of their expects, which was an extremely hard test for Linuero. Apart from pitch-black darkness, there was nothing favorable for them in the surrounding environment. Then what could be the reason why the region was covered in pitch-black darkness? Light. The savage beasts were afraid of light. Once this thought flickered in Linuero's mind, she promptly gave a command to the supreme transcending level experts: they fear light. Use all the methods you have to produce light. Before Linuero had even finished, one after another, balls of light appeared in the hands of the supreme transcending level experts. The lights were like flames which instantly dazzled the mythical realm. The surrounding scenery instantly appeared in everyone's eyes. Countless rays of light gathered together, allowing the world to witness the heavenly sun again. Gluttonies, which were fond of crawling in darkness, instantly howled gloomily upon sensing the light. They curled their bodies and struggled against it. There was no question about the fact that they abhorred the dazzling light. The supreme transcending level experts were completely convinced by Linuero's strategies. With her outstanding plans, it wasn't a wonder that she was able to become the city lord. Also, it was no surprise that Lee Yoon-mu, who had always been extremely cautious, had dared to hand Lucky Wind City to her. This time, the supreme transcending level experts were thoroughly subdued. If they were truly forced to clash against Gluttonies who were even more powerful in darkness, it would have been disastrous for them. If the first layer of the mythical realm was so devastating, then who knew what the next would hold? But with Linuero's presence, the first layer's mythical realm was easily defeated by them. City Lord, how did you know that Gluttonies were afraid of light? Linuero smiled faintly. Because the instant we entered, darkness covered this region. At that time, I thought, why did we enter a region filled with pitch-black darkness? At first, I believed it was random, but seeing the reaction of Gluttonies, I knew that my other thought was indeed correct. Linuero's words filled the supreme transcending level experts with endless admiration. This was truly navigating dangers by relying on wisdom and cunning. Who knew how many such strange layers were present in the mythical realm? But with Linuero's cunning, if they wanted to advance through them, it shouldn't be considered anything difficult. The majority of people who had entered the mythical realm had died at the first checkpoint. When they encountered gluttonies, their first instinct was to fight them. Who among them would think whether this vicious beasts had any weak points? As it turned out, Linuero was adept at observing and analyzing, so the first layer was easily passed. The supreme transcending level experts then followed her into the second layer. The moment they entered it, an old man wearing white clothes and levitating like an immortal appeared. The old man looked at Linuero and smiled while twirling his beard. I hadn't expected that you little girl would be able to break the first layer of this realm. In the past thousands of years, you are the first one to clear it. This junior was only lucky. Linuero promptly replied with respect. Chapter 633, Joining Scandinavia. Yoon-mu opened his eyes in a daze. He found himself lying on a bed in an ice cave and immediately tried to get up. Where am I? Are you awake? You have been unconscious for a long time. Brunhilde entered the ice cave and looked at him with a faint smile. Brunhilde's image in Yoon-mu's mind was one of a savage and cruel person. But the one before him seemed to be much more gentler compared to before. He wasn't used to this. However, he didn't know that there had been many changes in Brunhilde's temperament in this short period of time. She now clearly recognized Yoon-mu's strength despite him being immortal. In the beginning, when he had claimed that he would become a deity in half a year and join the ranks of gods, she had been unconvinced. But after she personally witnessed him severely injuring Hades, she realized that he possessed unlimited potential. Yoon-mu felt his body shudder from top to bottom and couldn't help but ask, weren't we attacked by Hades? What happened after that? Why don't I remember anything? When he thought of the last events, he felt a sharp twinge in his head, and pain spread through various parts of his body. You truly don't remember anything? Brunhilde asked with her eyes wide open. Yoon-mu shook his head. He only remembered the system loading some power with urgency as if as long as the loading was finished, his strength would obtain a qualitative leap. Odin had chosen to disobey the heavenly gods' council's Hades for Scandinavia and the system, and Yoon-mu had attacked Hades to stop him from finishing off the injured Odin and Brunhilde. But unfortunately, when he attacked, he felt that his body had been filled with some unknown power, following which he lost consciousness. He had no recollection of what happened afterwards and could only ask the others about it. He remembered clearly that they were in the land of ice, but where exactly were they at that moment? Brunhilde mumbled to herself for a moment, then replied, You defeated Hades. What? Did I really do that? Yoon-mu didn't dare to believe it. He had only acted by following the system's direction and hadn't thought of other things. Upon hearing Brunhilde's words, he was left utterly astonished. Who didn't know how formidable Hades was? So how could he who couldn't even be considered a fake god defeat that guy with his ancient god-level cultivation? However, that being in your body assisted you. After it forced you into the dark state, you seemed to have transformed into a completely different person and acted with complete ruthlessness toward Hades. You severely injured him, and if Zeus hadn't arrived promptly, I fear that Hades would have truly died in the land of ice. Yoon-mu took a deep breath and mumbled inwardly to himself, This damned system, how many times is it going to take control of my body? It actually threw me into the dark state? Although the fierce short-term increase in his strength had allowed him to overpower an ancient god, the reason why the system didn't allow Yoon-mu to use it in ordinary situations was because the power of the dark state would only last for a specific period of time, since it was very unstable. Moreover, after using it, his body would collapse from exhaustion and he wouldn't awaken for at least half a month. You have been unconscious for 10 days. But according to that being, you awakened a little bit earlier because you have already adapted to the exhaustion from the sudden increase in strength. Li Yoon-mu snorted and mumbled under his breath, "The system is talking behind my back again." "Where are we?" he inquired loudly. "This is Scandinavia. In the future, this will be our room. We will get married in front of the entire Scandinavia the day after tomorrow. In the future, you will be ranked among the gods, as soon as my father finds a proper divine title for you." Li Yoon-mu narrowed his eyes. This so-called divine title should be similar to Thunder God Thor or Fire God Loki, like the job title before one's name. Brunhilde nodded. "Yes, I forgot to tell you. My father has summoned back all the gods of Scandinavia, so from now on, Scandinavia will eternally serve that being inside your body with steadfast loyalty. We will assist you in becoming the new king of the origin world." Li Yoon-mu wasn't much interested in other matters. He only asked one more question of Brunhilde. "If I become the new king of the origin world, will I sink down to become a chess piece in the hands of others? Or will my fate be completely in my control and won't be influenced by others?" Brunhilde nodded at him once more. "Naturally. At that time, you will be the most senior god, and everyone will have to swear allegiance to you. At that time, of course you wouldn't be influenced by others and instead would control others." Two terrifying lights flashed in Li Yoon-mu's eyes. This was what he had come to the origin world for. Only by becoming the new king of the origin world could he change up his situation, and for that, he would definitely exploit Scandinavia to fulfill his aim. "Don't think of doing anything devious. I had to persuade that old bastard Odin for a long time until he was willing to agree. That old bastard is very shrewd, so your thoughts won't escape his eyes." After receiving the system's reminder, Li Yoon-mu asked it, "Then what should I do?" "What do you still need to do? Just be a spectator. Now that you obtained a huge supporter, no one will think of dealing with us in the origin world for the time being. They will first have to settle their internal strife, and at that time, you can use Scandinavian God Council to catch them all in one swoop." Li Yoon-mu's lips curled upwards. "It's just a military tactic on paper. I see that your plan hasn't followed the original direction you intended. Ha ha ha, those are just a few glitches. This time, you should genuinely listen to me. Since you provoked the Heavenly Gods Council, those people won't take this matter lying down. Our and Scandinavia's fates are now linked together, so we cannot fail to live up to their expectations." Li Yoon-mu was given the liberty to enter and leave any location in Scandinavia, which was a kindness that became firmly edged in his heart. However, he naturally wasn't a coward, since he knew that it would involve Scandinavia. Why would he wait for them to come? Naturally, he would choose to take the initiative and go find everyone. This was Li Yoon-mu's own strategy, but when he heard the system speaking in high spirits, he didn't dare to interrupt it. "But presently, you still have a very important task to finish. Only then will you be able to take the initiative to attack. Otherwise, it will be considered as me breaking my promise to Odin." Chapter 634, Illusion God Appears. The old man with twirly beard narrowed his eyes, then said with a smile to Linuero, "Luck is also a skill. Little girl, seems like you are filled with confidence about the second layer of the mythical realm. May I ask, senior, who you are?" The old man laughed heartily. "This old man is Illusion God. And this illusion mythical realm was established by me. Countless have entered it, but few of those people relied on wisdom like you." This old man was somewhat unable to remain patient and had to send my will here to see who exactly was it that had broken the first layer of my mythical realm. "I hadn't expected that it would surprisingly be a little girl like you, H.A.H.A.K. Seeing the seemingly magnanimous old man, Linuero still replied with modesty. "Many thanks to senior for your praise. Girl, if you can pass the 5 layers of this mythical realm, not only will this old man let you out, I will also give you a treasure. What do you think about that?" Upon hearing the old man trying to lure her with a treasure, Linuero was sure that the next 4 layers definitely wouldn't be as easy as the first one. But her interest was suddenly piqued by the reward mentioned by the old man. "All right, senior, then it's settled. Good, good, good. Ha ha ha. I haven't encountered such a lively youth in a long time. Now, you have to be extremely careful. The level of difficulty in the next 4 levels is much higher than in the first one. If you are unable to leave this mythical realm, you'll have agreed to this old man's one request. Wasn't this a bet with her? Linuero's complexion changed slightly, but it quickly disappeared. She then asked in an indifferent tone, "What request? Tell me. As long as I can do it, I will agree to it. If you are unable to leave this mythical realm, all of you will remain behind as the servants of this old man's mythical realm for a period of 10 years. 10 years. What was the difference between his offer and being imprisoned for 10 years? Why would anyone agree to it? So this was the truth. No wonder then that the majority of people who entered the mythical realm had been unable to come out. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but that they had been enslaved. If they weren't able to clear the mythical realm, they would become the puppets of the old man. The supreme transcending level experts shook their heads and hoped that Linuero wouldn't give a foolish answer. But Linuero didn't think about it much. Since she was able to clear the first layer, she would certainly do her utmost to clear the next 4 layers as well. She was still quite interested in the treasure mentioned by the old man. This interest compelled her to proceed with going forward. In any case, if she couldn't advance through the next layers, how were they supposed to leave this mythical realm anyway? When Linuero thought about the high possibility of Lucky Wind City encountering an enormous crisis that very night, she felt that she couldn't stay here for long. I agree to your bet. The supreme transcending level experts were startled. Linuero was a truly courageous and insightful person, and their group of people with high cultivation were still quite inferior to this young girl. This left them feeling ashamed. The old man began to laugh heartily. Good, good, good. You are quite bold. I like young people like you. Come, enter this old man's second layer. You all must be careful, the next layers of the mythical realm contain more than just savage beasts. Before the old man's words could be fully processed, everyone's surroundings changed. No one could say what unknown dangers would they face then, but Linuero was confident in her ability to deal with them. Yoon-mu creased his brows and asked, "What matter? Why are you being so secretive? Are you trying to deceive me again? Don't misunderstand me, I only pointed out the correct method to use that little girl's long spear. This method requires her to coordinate with you." What coordination? Yoon-mu suspiciously looked at the system. He had absolutely no idea as to what enormous hole had been dug by the system now, who was just waiting for him to jump into it. The system burst out laughing. You must immediately get married to Brunhilde. After you get married, won't there be a ceremony in the secret inner room? You should know what you need to know about going there with Brunhilde. As a man, you can't tell me that you don't know. Yoon-mu was completely dumbstruck. What was the system trying to express? He felt another headache coming to him. Suddenly Brunhilde uncomfortably asked Yoon-mu, "Yes. As the being inside your body says, we must be mutually compatible, only then could I truly unleash the genuine might of the long spear." That being talked about pouring some yin and yang energy? Is this some secret power cultivated in your hometown? Do you know what it is? Yoon-mu was slightly startled. When he again thought about the vague words used by the system, his face instantly flushed red. He cursed in his heart, "System, you old dog. You are surprisingly passing dirty thoughts to Brunhilde." The system laughed calmly. "Don't tell me you won't combine your yin and yang after getting married? You youngster, can you refrain from it?" Upon hearing the system's words, Yoon-mu wanted to crawl into a hole deep in the earth. Damn it! Wasn't this a matter between him and Brunhilde? So why is it getting so excited? Wasn't the system a completely wretched old man? When Yoon-mu thought about how the guy residing in his body was a dirty old man, he felt his scalp go numb. Brunhilde naively blinked at Yoon-mu and asked, what exactly is it? Are you also not going to tell me? Whether it was my dad or that being inside your body, I was unable to make sense of their words, and now you are also unwilling to tell me. We should quickly get married, so you can tell me, right? Lee Yoon-mu coughed and then nervously explained, that is, a man and a woman strip their clothes and then fight on the bed. Fight? Then why would we get naked? Forget about it. I still cannot do it anyway, or else my recuperation won't be able to keep up. Lee Yoon-mu said somewhat shamefully. The system laughed in a wretched eye, and Lee Yoon-mu furiously said, are you still laughing? All of this was started by you. How can you ask me to explain the matters between men and women to an innocent woman? Brunhilde's lips twitched. In any case, father said that when we get married, I will know. At that time, you must explain it to me. Seeing Brunhilde's naive and adorable appearance, Lee Yoon-mu was slightly stupefied. Wasn't she too pure? Wasn't this cheating? A completely naive and innocent woman was rarely seen in the world. Brunhilde placed her hand on Lee Yoon-mu's shoulder and said, why are you so shocked? My father said to lead you to first meet my elder brothers. Normally, a mortal like you wouldn't be suitable to meet with elder brothers, but father explained that from now on, you are a Scandinavian, so everyone will treat you as an equal. Your elder brothers? Thunder God Thor and Fire God Loki. Chapter 635, Marrying a Mortal. Brunhilde didn't pay any attention to whether Lee Yoon-mu was willing or not and pulled him by hand toward the palace hall. Scandinavia was located at the center of the land of ice. With Odin's divine power gradually returning, the entire place began to show its original appearance. After coming out of the ice cave, Lee Yoon-mu glanced around and surprisingly saw ice sculptures everywhere in the land of ice. They stretched for tens of thousands of miles and had matchless elegance. They were also extremely conspicuous. Scandinavia was situated at the center of the majestic land of ice and had a majestic palace. Soon, it entered Lee Yoon-mu's vision. When he entered the anteroom of the castle, there was a long red carpet stretched out in front of him. This was Scandinavia. Lee Yoon-mu was somewhat dazzled, but the system inside his body awakened him. Odin has already recovered his divine power, and Scandinavia, conveniently located in the land of ice, has also recovered its original form. Although it is still somewhat inferior to the Scandinavia of the past, it has already recovered properly. This is the foundation of our existence in the origin world. Lee Yoon-mu nodded and walked on the red carpet. Brunhilde walked in front of him while pulling his arm in an adorable way. There were many Scandinavian servants kneeling on the ground in their vicinity. They didn't even dare to raise their heads, and with such respectful treatment, Lee Yoon-mu and Brunhilde proceeded toward the main palace hall. When it was almost within reach, Lee Yoon-mu became somewhat tense in his heart. He still hadn't seen any of the numerous gods of Scandinavia. When they entered the palace hall, the Scandinavian gods were all seated in their respective seats. And Lee Yoon-mu, who was still a mortal, had entered this place, which could be considered a miracle. The expressions of the Scandinavian servants were quite unfathomable. They had even heard that Lee Yoon-mu was planning to marry their princess. It was the most shocking news for them. The name of the Scandinavian Valkyrie had spread far and wide in the origin world. However, the mortal in front of their eyes, was regarded as important enough by Odin to have betrothed his treasured daughter to him. It could only be understood that the mortal was certainly not someone ordinary. Something about him had to surpass the others. Thunder God Thor and Fire God Loki were sitting on the two sides of the throne. Both of them had married and settled down a long time ago, and were only waiting to settle their sister's marriage. But Odin had told them something which neither of them had expected. Their sister wanted to marry a mortal. Thor didn't feel much regarding this matter because he himself had found a mortal wife. Because of that, he was naturally quite supportive for his sister. But Loki was quite opposed to the idea. Moreover, he felt that Odin's action was encroaching on the dignity of Scandinavia. "Father, how can you allow sister to marry a mortal? What about the dignity of Scandinavia? Our history of thousands of years, don't tell me that you want to get it ruined in the hands of a mortal. Shut your mouth, Loki. Respect your sister's choice. This is what you must do as her elder brother. Queen Frigg said while blocking him. Loki sneered at her. Then what about Scandinavia's face? This is Asgard, not a region where mortals can live. Yoon-mu slightly kicked his brows. The person who appeared to be extremely opposed to him was probably fire god Loki. His eyes were jet black and filled with complete disdain toward Yoon-mu. Clearly, he was extremely unfriendly toward him, which was something Brunhilde couldn't tolerate. Brother Loki, this is a major turning point in my life which has been approved by Father himself. If you have something which you are resentful about, then come me instead of making things difficult for Father. Odin didn't say anything when he saw the two siblings quarreling. When he looked at Yoon-mu's silhouette, he was looking at the man who was possibly the future king of the origin world. It was natural, however, that Loki did not know this secret. It was only known by people at Master God level and above. As for the ancient gods, they still possess sufficient qualifications to know them. Yoon-mu opened his mouth to speak, but just as he was about to speak, the system spoke in his mind. Do you intend to dispute their words? To fight against them with your identity as a mortal? Then what else can I do? I cannot allow the atmosphere to become more awkward. Yoon-mu was actually thinking of placating Loki's mood and casually promising them that him becoming a god was only a matter of time. What are you thinking of promising them? Is that even necessary? Do you think they would believe the lies out of a mortal's mouth? Don't try to interfere. It's the best course of action for you. Don't talk and just wait for Odin to make the final decision. If Odin isn't willing to accept you as his son-in-law, your glib talk will be useless. Likewise, if Odin is willing to accept you into Scandinavia, then regardless of how the others oppose, you will still become a Scandinavian. Others won't be able to say anything to you. The words Yoon-mu had intended to say got stuck in his throat after the system's speech. Its words were indeed correct. Not speaking seemed to really be the best counterattack toward Loki, who was looking for trouble with him. This father of yours won't be deterred by whether you are willing or not. I will be your sister's husband. Even if you don't agree, that won't change the fact. Loki was still showing his resentment though. He even suggested to Odin, we should try to connect with the heavenly gods' council by marriage. That is the only way forward for our Scandinavia. Other ways wouldn't be able to display our Scandinavia's dignity. According to Loki's words, he was already intending to become a lackey of the heavenly gods' council. If he heard that Yoon-mu had already beaten Hades, who knew how excessive his attitude would become? When Odin heard Loki mention heavenly gods' council, his eyes filled with fury. Enough! This matter is up to your sister, and your opinion is not needed, he bellowed. Thor also patted Loki's shoulder. Younger brother, this is our sister's choice. We have to respect her chosen man and give our blessings to them. Thor was being reasonable. Perhaps this was because he had also married a mortal, and she had also been promoted by Odin and had entered the ranks of God. Thus, she had become an able helper for Thor and become known as Earth Goddess Sif. Although her status was very high, she was the only mortal who had been promoted to fulfill a god's duty. It could be said that Sif was the target of every ordinary person's envy. Many mortals even idolized her. They never gave up hope that one day they might also climb up the ladder and enter the ranks of gods. Yoon-mu was the perfect example of this. Chapter 636, Test of Survival. The second layer of mythical realm gradually appeared in everyone's vision. It was a desert with scorching sun and an ocean of sand stretching as far as the eye could see. Just a look at it could frighten people. How could they walk out of this sort of illusion that confronted with a ruthless desert? In the first layer of the mythical realm, they had to face vicious beasts, while in the second layer they had to deal with a vile natural environment. There was no water, so how could they hold on for several days? And if that wasn't enough, even trying to find the direction was easier said than done in a desert. The supreme transcending level experts were all in complete despair. They had the ability to fight, but confronting a vile natural environment left them helpless. They would rather deal with some vicious beasts than fight against nature, because 9 out of 10 times, they would lose. After all, only when they reached deity realm could they survive in the desert without eating or drinking. And they clearly hadn't reached deity realm. Speaking frankly, they were still considered to be mortals. Then how could they move forward while facing such vile environment? This was the old man's test for everyone. Previously, when someone cleared the first layer of mythical realm by a fluke and entered the second layer, they were buried in the ocean of sand and turned into a yellow sand with time. That way, they lost the gamble with the old man and remained in the mythical realm eternally without being able to leave. But Linuero wasn't someone who was willing to give up easily. She kept looking at the scorching sun in the sky and tried to find the right direction in the desert. City Lord, we should renounce this layer. The supreme transcending level experts were gasping for breath and already willing to give up. Their mouths ran dry from talking in such an environment, but they still persisted. This had turned out to be the biggest test for them. Most of their lips had begun to crack, and their complexions were pale. Illusion God was at the center of the mythical realm at that moment, playing chess with himself. He said with a slight laugh, "Little girl, luck won't always help you. At some point in time, it is bound to run out. Properly enjoy the torture of this dangerous environment." But Linuero was still trying to find some flaw, certain that she would be able to do it. She raised her head and looked in the direction of the scorching sun once more. It was moving toward the west. Although this told them one of the cardinal directions, their path was still a road to ruin if they didn't know where they could find water. Most of the supreme transcending level experts were already finding it difficult to manage. As mortals, they were unable to prevail for long in such an environment. If they couldn't find a way to leave, they would be trapped until death claimed them. If that truly happened, Linuero wouldn't be able to give an explanation to Yoon-mu and fail to live up to his expectations for her. This won't do. I have to uplift them. Others can collapse, but I can't. Linuero suddenly became even more determined. She took a deep breath and said to everyone, "We need to save our energy for the time being while I try to find a way out of this desert. You all must persevere." "City Lord, what exactly should we do now?" the supreme transcending level experts asked in unison. They entrusted their final hope to Linuero, since she was everyone's pillar of support. If she gave up for even a moment, then the supreme transcending level experts who followed her staunchly would also lose all hope. Linuero felt some dizziness in her brain, but she tried her best to calm herself and began to go over all the information she had gathered. "Soon," she said, "based on the angle formed between the direction of the sun and the ground, I can make a rough guess about the location of a water source. The only problem in front of us is finding it, but as long as we can find it, this desert will collapse." Upon hearing Linuero's words, the morale of the supreme transcending level experts was lifted, and their determination to persevere became exceptionally strong. "We all are convinced that City Lord can lead us out of here." Hearing everyone's praise, Linuero's trust in herself also increased greatly. She then said to them, "Walk in the direction I pointed out. I'm certain of it based on the angle between the desert and the sun. As long as we can find the coordinates of that location, we will find the water source." All the supreme transcending level experts tried to find the water source along the direction pointed out by Linuero. But what made them feel despair was that the direction pointed out by Linuero only contained more desert. The water source which she had mentioned never appeared. Could she have made a mistake? The female Zhujiang had finally made a mistake while challenging the mythical realm. But Linuero was unwilling to accept defeat. It was impossible for her to have been wrong. She was sure that they should be able to find a water source in the direction she had calculated earlier. Illusion God found Linuero more and more interesting and said with a faint smile, "Little girl, you should surrender and accept defeat." Staying in this mythical realm to accompany this old man will also be quite pleasurable. What do you say? Heavy responsibility burdened Linuero's shoulders, so it was impossible for her to waver because of a few lines from Illusion God. Not only would she have to answer to Li Yoon-mu, there was also that woman Ling Shuang. Sometimes, Linuero was quite stubborn. Whatever was said, she would struggle to finish the task even if it was deemed impossible by others. Linuero seemed to have sensed some hints from the old man's words. Why would he suddenly ask her to surrender? Before this, he hadn't said anything, let alone asked her to surrender. But now, the old man spoke up and asked them to accept defeat. There could only be two possible reasons for that. First, he felt that the people on her side wouldn't be able to last much longer, and because he didn't want any of them to be killed, he came to stop them. But the possibility of this being true was extremely low, because the old man hadn't ever met any of the supreme transcending level experts, so why would he care about their fate? On the contrary, the death of those people would probably make him rejoice, since they would add to the pieces of art in his mythical realm. Then the other possible reason for him advising them to surrender was because they were close to clearing this level. The old man hoped that they would have grown desperate enough to take an easy way out by surrendering right before the finish line. City Lord, shouldn't we renounce? At least we would be able to leave this lair. Afterwards we could look for a way to escape the old man's mythical realm. Linuero shook her head. How could it be that simple? If it was, wouldn't it be like a dream come true? Senior, I have already found the location of the source of water. You don't need to continue urging me. I know that I can immediately clear this lair, and that's why you are panicking. The old man burst out laughing. Then why don't you try to leave this lair? Linuero narrowed her eyes. The water source should be underneath the desert, which is why you are nervous. You got afraid that we will discover this secret and urged us to surrender, right? Chapter 637, For You. Thor was extremely amiable, and he walked to Li Yoon-mu and patted his shoulder. After you get married to my sister, treat her well. This child doesn't understand, so you will need to be more responsible. Her temperament isn't very good either, so I hope you can be patient with her. Other than this, her elder brother, don't have much to say. By Thor's words, it was clear that he somewhat accepted Li Yoon-mu. His words also caused Brunhilde's face to instantly flush red. But as a Valkyrie, she also had her dignity and raised her head while saying with a smile, Elder brother, are you making fun of me again? How do I not have a good temperament? Her bad temperament and Li Yoon-mu had experienced firsthand. The memory of her chasing him into Whale City was still fresh in his mind. Loki sneered at them. All of you agree to this wedding? You're willing to allow our Scandinavia's princess to be wedded to a mortal? Truly ridiculous. Enough. My decision is final, and thou sister's marriage will be held the day after tomorrow. Thou best not create trouble, otherwise I won't forgive you easily. Loki coldly snorted, then stormed off in a huff. Scandinavia's other numerous gods began to congratulate Li Yoon-mu and Odin. It was clear that Li Yoon-mu was still not really accepted by everyone. Apart from the amiable Thor, others actually disdained him and kept him beneath contempt. After all, he was a mortal marrying Scandinavia's princess, which was the same as living off a woman. Do all the mortals now wish to climb up the ladder by relying on others' work? Not only that, they also don't mind living off a woman, some of the guests said in a peculiar tone. Yes, our Valkyrie has a high prestige, but she has reduced herself by marrying a mortal. Scandinavia's face has truly hit rock bottom. Odin, our Scandinavia is majestic, so have you decided to abandon your daughter for all time? When Li Yoon-mu heard those enigmatic words which seemed to be humiliating him, his eyebrows creased. He was extremely resentful and couldn't help but glare at those people. A hint of gloominess was also present in his gaze. He was itching to pounce on those people who didn't put him in their eyes and give them a good beating that very instant. But when all was said and done, he was still in other people's territory. So if he took action, it would seem like he was pretentious and didn't understand proper etiquette. Thus, he controlled himself. Odin didn't care about anyone's opinion and only considered Lee Yoon-mu's strength. Since it was tyrannical, there was no need to be concerned about any rumors or slander. Instead, it was better to wait until Lee Yoon-mu displayed his strength in Scandinavia. At that instant, all the rumors would be completely discredited. However, although Lee Yoon-mu had chosen to not care about them, the short-tempered Brunhilde couldn't bear hearing everyone's words. She kicked the table of guests who were talking maliciously about Lee Yoon-mu and coldly stated, "What were you all saying just now? Try saying something about my fiancé again." Brunhilde's kick forced all the people to obediently shut their mouths. But Lee Yoon-mu could still hear them muttering. He relies on a woman to settle his matters. Brunhilde pulled Lee Yoon-mu's arm and told him, "You needn't care about them. There are always people who don't have eyes. We clearly understand what sort of strength you have. One day they will also know your ferociousness." When Lee Yoon-mu was comforted by Brunhilde, his expression finally eased up a little. If one's wife was like her, what else would they need? The present Brunhilde didn't resemble the barbaric woman who had chased him some time ago. Instead, she was extremely gentle and virtuous while also possessing beautiful looks. If they truly married, Lee Yoon-mu didn't mind following the system's opinion and cultivating yin and yang energy with her, which would allow her godly spear to display enormous might. Truthfully speaking, the present Scandinavia was like a tiger that had grown wings after Lee Yoon-mu had joined it. He could assist Brunhilde in training with her godly spear, making the spear display its peak strength. He could also stop the offense of heavenly gods' council, so Scandinavia wouldn't need to fear it. Moreover, the unknown being resided in his body. Its existence alone was a great increase in strength for Scandinavia. This country had long ago shed its original form, which could easily be forced by heavenly gods' council to yield. From then on, Scandinavia could become a nation which other gods would be willing to join, unlike before when apart from Odin, its other people were of little importance. After Odin went back, the banquet was considered to have officially concluded. Following that, the matter of Lee Yoon-mu and Brunhilde's marriage also became official. The majority of people couldn't understand Odin and Brunhilde, but they could only accept it. Perhaps the mortal had the aptitude far surpassing others? But what they didn't know was that Odin was intending to make Lee Yoon-mu Scandinavia's ruler after he married his precious daughter Brunhilde. After all, the unknown existence inside Lee Yoon-mu's body was extremely advantageous for Scandinavia. After the end of the banquet, Lee Yoon-mu still felt somewhat disappointed. Being ridiculed by everyone was a great humiliation for him. "Are you still angry?" Lee Yoon-mu waved his hand. "Forget it, I won't take these matters to heart. On the contrary, your attitude toward me seems to have changed quite quickly." Brunhilde laughed and said, "We will soon be married, so we naturally must assist each other. I cannot allow others to humiliate you. You are Brunhilde's man, so you can only hold me alone and aren't permitted to speak about others." Looking at Brunhilde's loving eyes, Lee Yoon-mu nodded. "Hades has been severely injured? Who dared to attack him?" After Emperor of Sea Poseidon returned to Whale City, the entire Heavenly Gods' Council was astonished. The earlier matter was an enormous humiliation for them. The matter of King of Hell Hades being defeated by a mortal had spread among the gods around the world. It was not only Zeus that lost face from it, but the whole Heavenly Gods' Council was turned into a joke. How are Hades' injuries? This resentment must be paid in full. Who is that person who injured Hades? I will go and settle the debt right now. The Emperor of Sea Poseidon was somewhat impatient. Sitting atop his throne, Zeus waved his hands, and a terrifying expression flashed through his eyes. After this day, our Heavenly Gods' Council and Scandinavia cannot exist under the same sky. Prepare for war. We will wreck Asgard, which they are so proud of, he coldly stated. Hearing Zeus' command, the entire Heavenly Gods' Council knelt on the ground and said in a heavy tone, Yes. Hades' injuries had thoroughly infuriated Zeus, who already had a fiery temper. Whatever explanations were said, he was unable to endure the resentment in his heart. Chapter 638, Different Choices. As the heavenly gods' council became increasingly more restless and started planning against Asgard because of Hades' injuries, it seemed that the origin world was going to be embroiled in a huge war. However, far away in the land of ice, Scandinavia didn't seem to realize the approaching crisis. It was preparing for Yoon-mu and Brunhilde's wedding. Odin couldn't let the marriage between his daughter and the mortal to be a casual event. He would conduct his daughter's wedding ceremony in a dazzling way, so that the being inside Yoon-mu's body wouldn't look down on him. Asgard was excessively lively because of that, but Yoon-mu wasn't in a joyous mood. His heart was still stuck on Lucky Wind City. Who knew what was its current state after Linuero had taken over its management? Hopefully, she hadn't ruined the prestige of Lucky Wind City along with the supreme transcending level experts raised single-handedly by him. Seeing Yoon-mu's depression, Brunhilde knitted her brows and asked, "Hey you, I am soon going to be married to you, so why don't you feel a bit more happy about it? Marrying Scandinavia's Valkyrie as a mortal, shouldn't you feel proud?" Yoon-mu faintly laughed. "I am a little bit nervous." Brunhilde sat down next to Yoon-mu and placed the godly spear on the ground. In a voice which was no longer crude, but rather soft and gentle, she asked, "Nervous about what? Are you worried that I will eat you?" Yoon-mu shook his head, saying, "The power structure of the origin world is enormous and extremely complex. And I have defeated Hades. I fear that the heavenly gods' council won't be willing to leave this matter at that. It might turn out to be an enormous catastrophe for Scandinavia. I was just thinking about the imminent danger." Previously, Brunhilde would have had anything to do with a mortal, but because of Yoon-mu's appearance, her thinking had completely changed. She lightly kissed his cheek and said, "Thanks for thinking about Scandinavia. It doesn't matter. If the heavenly gods' council truly invades, our Scandinavia will definitely resist. Those people are truly arrogant and conceited, always looking down upon Scandinavia. Our men and women would fight until death for their motherland." Yoon-mu lowered his head. "However, all of this is because of me," he said in a heavy tone. "But you are already a Scandinavian. We won't close our eyes to your matters. All right, if Heavenly Gods Council truly invades Scandinavia, I also won't hold back against them. Together with everyone, I will drive them away from Scandinavia." When Brunhilde nodded, the system inside Yoon-mu's body chose to speak up. "You don't need to be anxious. If those people of Heavenly Gods Council really come to Asgard, it will be extremely beneficial for us. Do you already have a plan to annihilate them?" Yoon-mu asked in astonishment. "What plan? Did you forget about the secret genetic code from Whale City? Isn't that why you stayed behind in the origin world? If it was decrypted by those gods of ancient past, the origin world's god creation program would be started. That secret genetic code is in the hands of the Heavenly Gods Council at this moment. We didn't provoke them, but now they are provoking us. Thus, we can use the opportunity while they are busy attacking Scandinavia to steal the secret genetic code from them. That being said, I must stop their god creation program." Yoon-mu's eyes threatened to split open when he said in shock, "What are you saying? You plan to sacrifice Scandinavia?" He only said it in his heart and didn't just blurt it out. Otherwise, if Brunhilde who was sitting by his side had heard those words, she definitely wouldn't have continued to act gentle toward him. He and the being inside him might both be instantly viewed as a mortal enemy. "Don't talk nonsense. Who intends to sacrifice Scandinavia? I only wanted them to occupy Heavenly Gods Council for a while. I will discuss this matter with Odin, and he will definitely agree. After all, the threat posed by the secret genetic code is larger than the threat of Heavenly Gods Council. Once the God creation program is unleashed, the entire origin world will be thrown into chaos. If the number of gods surpasses the number of mortals, the existence of gods would lose its meaning. Lee Yoon-mu began to hesitate. He didn't want Scandinavia to face such a fate. If it was annihilated, he would lose his foundation in the origin world. He wasn't willing to lose it so easily after he had finally gained it. Don't be stupid. You mustn't forget why have you come to origin world. It was in order to control your own fate and make sure that it isn't under anyone else's control. If the God creation program succeeds, countless fake gods and artificial gods will appear in this world. At that time, will there still be a place for you to stand? Lee Yoon-mu tightly clenched his fists while looking at the hopeful gaze of Brunhilde. How could he bear to abandon his newlywed wife to such danger? It was impossible for him. Why can't we just force the Heavenly Gods Council to hand over the secret genetic code after defeating them? Lee Yoon-mu still hoped that the system wouldn't renounce Scandinavia or at least would postpone other matters until Scandinavia defeated Heavenly Gods Council. But the system only sneered at him. You think that those Heavenly Gods Council people don't know my aim for coming to the origin world? You are truly naive. We cannot hesitate in the slightest in this matter, since we will only have this single opportunity. If we fail to grasp it properly, then we wouldn't be able to think of obtaining the secret genetic code again, for the aftermath at that time would be too horrible to contemplate. Not only Scandinavia, even the entire origin world would be destroyed. Is that what you want to see? Don't think of saving a little only to lose a lot. Do you understand this principle or not? Don't be indecisive like a woman. You should be able to support both heavens and earth like a man. If you hesitate, you will never be able to succeed. After hearing the system's teachings, Lee Yoon-mu took a deep breath. It was basically like choosing between the bigger picture and smaller picture. In life, everyone always got to face such a decision. All the heroes from the past until then had had to face this type of difficult decision. The bigger picture was the fate of the origin world while the smaller picture was the fate of Scandinavia and Brunhilde, who were like family to him. If anyone had to choose between them, the majority of people would choose the bigger picture and abandon the smaller picture. And so they would be considered to be heroes. Chapter 639, The Invasion of Heavenly Gods Council. Lee Yoon-mu's choice was different from the heroes. He chose to protect the smaller picture, because in his heart, if he couldn't protect the smaller picture, then relying on what would he defend the bigger picture? However, he went completely silent to make it seem like he gave his tacit approval to the system. In his heart though, he was completely clear that if there ever came a time when he truly had to make the choice, he would fight together with Scandinavia to resist Heavenly Gods Council. The next day, Scandinavia began to prepare the wedding which had captured the attention of the whole world. Brunhilde was a grand princess who was being served by maids helping her put on the bridal makeup. After dressing up, she turned into an astonishing beauty. In the past, everyone had considered her a masculine woman, especially her elder brother Thor. When he looked at his sister then though, he was genuinely startled. Was this still the Valkyrie he knew? In terms of appearance alone, she far surpassed many goddesses of Heavenly Gods Council. In the wedding gathering, Lee Yoon-mu couldn't see the figure of Loki. He was extremely opposed to his sister marrying a mortal, so there was a good chance he might betray the entire Scandinavia in consequence. While the wedding was being conducted, Scandinavia's defenses were quite lax, which meant it was also the most optimum time to attack. At that moment, Loki was thousands of miles away from Scandinavia. He was discussing a major affair with a group of people. Loki, were you dispatched by Scandinavia to stop our Heavenly Gods Council? Zeus asked in a heavy tone. Loki sneered at him in response. I am not like those idiots of Scandinavia. If you would help me claim the throne of Scandinavia, I wouldn't mind assisting your Heavenly Gods Council in smashing the defenses of Asgard. The gods of Heavenly Gods Council had never thought that someone from Scandinavia would unexpectedly betray it until Loki appeared right in front of them. The reason behind his betrayal was very simple, which was that Odin didn't govern Scandinavia properly. If Scandinavia had been in his hands, Loki would administer it in the right way. Poseidon, who stood by Zeus' side, said softly, "I fear that he is lying, be careful." Zeus narrowed his eyes and said, "Why should we believe you?" Loki clenched a scepter in his hand and smiled. "I have already stolen Odin's scepter. Isn't this enough? Have I shown sufficient sincerity? Right now, the entire Scandinavia is busy with my sister's wedding and has no time to care about whether your heavenly gods' council attacks or not." Looking at Odin's scepter, everyone was somewhat astonished. This guy truly intends to betray Scandinavia. Zeus took a deep breath. If he truly helped Loki obtain the throne of Scandinavia, it would be truly terrifying, since who knew what sort of crazy moves he would make next. But presently, this wasn't Zeus' main concern. He would wait until Scandinavia was wiped out, then dealing with Loki wouldn't be too late. At that moment, exploiting him was the best course of action. Zeus' expression grew dignified, and he took the scepter from Loki's hand. "All right. I agree with you. We will rely on you to guide our heavenly gods' council." Loki glanced toward the numerous gods standing behind Zeus. With all these heavenly gods present, this time Scandinavia should be in grave crisis. This way, he should be able to claim the throne of Scandinavia. He truly disapproved of the way Odin ruled Scandinavia. As of then, it was greatly inferior to what Loki dreamt of creating. He had decided that he couldn't allow Scandinavia to degrade any further. The people from Heavenly Gods' Council began to advance towards Scandinavia under the guidance of Loki. The gods of Asgard, however, didn't know that danger was descending upon them. They were still immersed in Brunhilde's wedding ceremony. When the bride arrived on the stage, everyone was endlessly amazed. They were flabbergasted at how stunning she looked. How could they have ever known that Brunhilde was such a stunning beauty? After her, the groom arrived on the stage, which somewhat disappointed all the people in Asgard. He was escorted by Brunhilde's people, but the numerous gods still couldn't understand why Odin had made such a stupid decision to marry his daughter to a mortal. But Odin was famous for being stubborn, so no one dared to raise any dissent or objection. They could only remain silent and accept it. Naturally, some of them were unable to endure it, but like Loki, they were not present for the event. Odin, sitting on his throne, asked Frigg, "What about Loki?" She shook her head. "I haven't seen him for quite a while. Maybe because he is opposed to this marriage, he chose to not participate. This child Loki is truly too stubborn. Never mind. Continue with the wedding." Odin's dignified voice echoed through the hall, and Brunhilde and Yoon-mu together arrived at the main palace hall. They knelt down in front of Odin and Frigg and buried their heads in the snow. Odin raised his hand and said, "From today, mortal, thou will be added to my Scandinavia's gods." Everyone was gobsmacked. The mortal had actually found an opportunity to become a god. He was clearly fortunate, just like thunder god Thor's wife Sif. The system inside Yoon-mu's body suddenly grew agitated and shouted out, "They've arrived!" Yoon-mu's heart tightened. How could the people of Heavenly Gods' Council arrive so quickly and exactly when he and Brunhilde were in the process of getting married? This wasn't logical. The Heavenly Gods' Council needed to travel through the whole land of ice. Unless they took a shortcut, but no one besides the people of Asgard knew them. Could it be Yoon-mu's mind worked quickly, and he soon thought of the eyes who always found him unpleasant to look at and belonged to the man who didn't participate in his sister's wedding, Loki. Was it possible for him to have betrayed Scandinavia and brought over the Heavenly Gods' Council? Damn it, that Loki truly was up to no good. He was inherently brutal, so how could he possibly allow his sister being married to an insignificant mortal? The wedding had to be suspended. Yoon-mu suddenly stood up, which gave everyone a fright. "Brunhilde, I am sorry. Our wedding has to be stopped for the time being." Brunhilde's eyes filled with shock. What was the mortal thinking? Could it be that he didn't want to continue with the marriage? Odin's gaze also became terrifying. What was the meaning of this? Did the youth think that his daughter wasn't worthy of him? Chapter 640, enemy that cannot be seen. Linuero's words caused that old man's complexion to change slightly. The girl was truly someone with outstanding intelligence. At that moment, he could only laugh in the sky above. But the more he laughed with nervousness, the more certain Linuero became that her analysis was correct. Thereupon, she had the supreme transcending level experts dig into the sand, which she was certain would lead them to the source of water. The supreme transcending level experts were originally completely spent, but after hearing that there was a source of water there, they began to dig madly because of survival instinct. A source of water was extremely precious in a desert. If they could truly dig one out, they could survive in the desert for a long time and wouldn't have to be afraid of going anywhere. As they dug, sure enough a clear spring sprouted out. Seeing this, everyone began to crazily collect water like a famished beast who had seen food after a long time. In the meantime, Linuero said to the old man with extreme calmness, "We should be considered to have cleared this mythical realm." The old man began to laugh heartily. "You truly didn't disappoint me. Girl, you are truly an interesting person, but I wonder whether you can clear the next 3 layers or not. In this mythical realm, each layer is more difficult than the last one. Girl, are you certain that you wish to continue? If we don't choose to continue going forward, what other choice do we have?" Linuero had to pass through all the layers of the mythical realm and rush back into Lucky Wind City. If she was lucky, she might still make it in time. The mythical realm scenery changed again. The group then found themselves in the 3rd layer, and the unknown danger there alarmed Linuero and turned her somewhat indecisive. She took a deep breath and carefully observed the surrounding environment. It wasn't nasty like before nor covered in darkness like in the 1st layer. The scenery in this layer was quite ordinary. In fact, it was quite similar to the 1st realm after it was illuminated. This caused a hint of cold sweat to appear on Linuero's forehead. Wasn't the illusion god just switching between scenes in his mythical realm because of lack of skill? This was akin to deceiving the people who challenged the mythical realm. She didn't feel like mocking the illusion god over the flaws in his design, however. After some consideration, she realized that it could be used as a component in breaking through the mythical realm. In the 1st layer, she only needed to illuminate the world, and the problems raised by gluttonies were easily solved. While in the 2nd layer, they only needed to find a source of water to clear it. Then in the 3rd realm, what weakness would she need to discover? The supreme transcending experts didn't discover any peculiar regions in this realm. This relaxed all of them, and they casually report, "There doesn't seem to be any oddity in this layer." Linuero shook her head. In her eyes, it was impossible for the illusion god to prepare a layer with lower difficulty factor than the ones before. The last 2 layers had almost forced them into dire straits, so it was impossible that he would change his style in the 3rd layer. Whoosh! 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 One after another, cold arrows were shot at them. The supreme transcending level experts were somewhat shocked. There was surprisingly an enemy in this empty space? Being elites, the supreme transcending level experts immediately entered battle mode. They were trained to remain vigilant, and their instincts toward danger wouldn't easily fade away. Protect the city lord. The supreme transcending level experts immediately surrounded Linuero. Could it be that there was an undetected enemy at this juncture? Linuero was making a hypothesis while cold sweat continuously poured down the backs of the supreme transcending level experts. If they couldn't detect the enemy, they wouldn't be able to target them. Then wouldn't the enemy just exhaust the defenders' strength until they lost all energy and could easily be killed? City Lord, what should we do now? I cannot find the enemy. Couldn't you see the direction from which the arrows came? City Lord, I have already investigated it and couldn't see the silhouette of any enemy. Linuero narrowed her eyes. Undetectable enemy? Could it be a group of invisible people? That was impossible. If it was truly invisible people, then this mythical realm's design would be quite a cheat. Facing this layer, which was basically impossible to clear, Linuero complained to the illusion god. Senior, if you use despicable means like invisible enemy, then we will immediately admit defeat. Regardless of what you say, it is impossible for us to fight an invisible enemy. The old man began to laugh loudly. Naturally there are no invisible enemies. After confirming with the old man, Linuero had a guess. If it wasn't an invisible enemy, then the only remaining possibility was attacking using the space itself. In this space, there had to be some method to attack which they couldn't easily perceive. Linuero lifted her head and looked at the sky. She saw some concentric circles there, which seemed to be somewhat peculiar. Even if they were attacked from the concentric circles, it shouldn't have been long-range targeted attacks. The arrows should have simply fallen upon them because of gravity. After eliminating this option, the only other possibility was that the enemy was attacking them from level ground. But they couldn't see anything in front of them except rows of trees. Linuero knitted her brows. After a look at the trees, her eyes began to shine. Don't tell me that those arrows were shot from the direction of those trees? Then those trees were the only method to attack in the mythical realm. The supreme transcending level experts were finding it increasingly more difficult to resist, so Linuero quickly gave them a command. Go find the tracks of the attackers in those woods. It should be the direction from which the cold arrows were shot. There will certainly be some mechanism for attacking there. However, when they rushed into the woods, they couldn't discover any hidden mechanism. They also couldn't find any enemy. What method exactly are the enemies using to attack? What made Linuero feel even more hopeless was that when they arrived at the woods, the attacks stopped coming from there and changed to the distant mountains while increasing greater in volume. The supreme transcending level expert's complexion turned more and more unsightly. They had fallen into the trap of the undetected enemy, so how could they possibly clear the third layer? This was clearly quite embarrassing for them. But Linuero didn't even think of giving up. She had to find some method to rush out of the mythical realm. Her forehead was constantly filled with cold sweat as she thought about how exactly they were being attacked. One of the supreme transcending level experts was hit by an arrow, which shocked the other supreme transcending level experts. Linuero's complexion suddenly changed. What exactly should they do? The third layer was somewhat difficult. The illusion god placed a chess piece and burst out laughing. Little girl, you are very intelligent. But this third layer of the mythical realm is completely impossible for you to clear. Just chose to stay in this mythical realm and play with this old man. But his words didn't reach Linuero's ears. It was impossible for her to give up. Since she could clear 2 layers of the mythical realm, how could she give up on the third one?